Gather round, boys and girls. Today we have one of the most darkest moments and stories from Marvel's comic history. You want to know what we're talking about today? How Spider-Man killed the Marvel Universe. And yes, you did hear that right. And yes, it is crazy. You can forget your friendly neighborhood Spidey, as this one is anything but that. This is Peter Parker like you've never seen him before. It's brutal, chaotic, and honestly, it's gotten hard to watch at times. But it's impossible to look away, like a car crash or people that put pineapples on their pizzas. Anyway, let's get into it. Our story kicks off with Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, doing what he does best, hunting down people. And his target this time? Deadpool. And if you're thinking, wait, hasn't Punisher killed Deadpool before? And the answer is yes, about 32 times. So this would be the 33rd time. But Deadpool is like your annoying friend that texts you at 3 a.m. and asks if you're up. Frank Castle thought that he got rid of him, but he's back again. But this time, Frank tries a different strategy. He dismembers him and puts the pieces of him throughout the city. But that's just the intro to this story, and the real horror is about to begin. Cut to one of the most classic showdowns in all of New York history, Spider-Man vs. Rhino. Now imagine this, a classic superhero showdown in New York. You know the drill, heroes fighting villains, buildings getting wrecked, and some poor guy trying to get to work and wondering why his car's a pancake. But this time, something's off. Spider-Man's fighting Rhino, but instead of his usual quips and web-swinging fun, Spidey goes full psycho. And he doesn't just beat Rhino, he eats him. And this all takes place in the middle of a hockey game, where everyone can see, leading it to be the #1 talking point on the news that evening, in which they bring in Reed Richards for questioning, as he is the smartest dude in the Marvel Universe. And before this interview, they were able to subdue Spidey, and he was running some tests on him to figure out what was going on. And as he's giving this interview, Reed says that he's not possessed, he's not brainwashed, but his higher brain functions have shut down, leaving behind just a primal-like instinct. Basically, he's a raccoon that broke into your trash last night, but with superpowers, which is terrifying. But here's the kicker. It's not just Spider-Man. The next day, the Blob walks into a diner and just eats everyone inside. Daredevil goes full psycho and starts slaughtering nuns and makes jewelry out of their finger bones. Kids on a school bus start a killing spree inside of a mall. And it feels like someone just flipped the apocalypse switch on. Meanwhile, Frank Castle might actually be the reason for all this. Turns out during one of his shoot first, ask questions never missions, he interrupted an arms deal involving a bioweapon by the name of Survivor 118. And spoiler alert, it wasn't your typical bad guy weapon. It was designed to help humanity survive in a post-apocalyptic landscape. But instead, Punisher jumpstarts the apocalypse. But now he's on a mission to find and kill Patient Zero, aka Spider-Man. Along the way, he has to fight infected versions of his old buddies, starting with the Hulk, who has just recently eaten Wolverine whole. But during this fight, Frank finds one of Wolverine's claws and ends up breaking it off and using it as a bow and arrow to shoot straight through the Hulk's head. And arguably one of the most badass things I've seen in comic book history. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because I don't think that you could just break off one of Wolverine's claws, but we'll leave it at that. Comic books are comic books, enjoy them, have fun. Moving on to Frank's basically montage of taking out hero after hero after hero. The next person he runs into is Venom, who's mutated into some sort of nightmare fuel, who looks like Anti-Venom and Venom at the same time. Frank's journey is basically one long, brutal montage. Picture a post-apocalyptic road trip, but instead of snacks and a playlist, it's just blood, guts, and existential dread. And he even runs into Deadpool again, and somehow, still not dead. Anyway, the battles are savage. Frank doesn't hold back. Like imagine John Wick, but with even less regard for human life. And maybe angrier. And during these battles, Iron Man is taking on Red Hulk and everybody else around, basically putting hero after hero against each other until one victor comes out and there are survivors that survive. And there are some heroes that aren't even infected, including Iron Man. But he was the last one standing in this battle, in which something happened to his suit that locked him in it until he died, basically making a statue out of himself as remembrance of these savage battles in which hero was put against hero. And I honestly couldn't even imagine a worse way to die. Eventually, Frank tracks down Spider-Man's stronghold, in which Peter is basically ruling over what remains of humanity, like some sort of twisted king. And they make a deal in which Frank has to rescue MJ from the King of Death. Spoiler alert, it's Kingpin. And Spidey promises peace. So Frank storms into Kingpin's fortress with Mary Jane by his side. Well, by his side's being generous. She's more like a prisoner. Imagine chaos, carnage, and a whole lot of broken stuff. Frank's not done yet. He's seen too much, he's lost too much. And he keeps killing, unable to stop. It's like he's on autopilot, in which he takes out Kingpin and ends up rescuing MJ, returning her to Peter. After this, Frank decides to leave, but out of nowhere, turns around and shoots Peter directly in the head. No hesitation, no dramatic pause. Mary Jane, horrified, calls the Punisher a monster. And Frank just shrugs and says, "I don't make deals with monsters." And that line hit harder than Spider-Man hitting the pavement. But the Punisher isn't the hero here. He actually thinks that this way makes it easier for him to not have to deal with the grays of humanity. Now everything's black and white. If you're infected, you die. If you're not, you live. Simple. And Frank ends this story by sending Mary Jane and the rest of the survivors across the river to another suburb, saying that there's nothing but monsters left here. And that's where we'll stop for today. But real talk, if you were in this situation, what would be your strategy? Would you team up with Punisher? Hide out in Wakanda? Pretend to be a mannequin at a department store? Drop your plan in the comments, because I need to know who I would team up with when this apocalypse hits. And if you thought this was dark, wait until you see what's next. Smash that like button and subscribe for more. Until next time, and as always, I love y'all. Stay beautiful.